Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3 of Last Minute FPL. This is our Gameweek 3 podcast. Good evening, Vikas. How are you?
Good. Had a pretty good and relaxed weekend. What about you?
I think it helps that you got a really good score in FPL. Yeah, not so great as a United fan, but yeah, we'll dive into it. A lot of wildcards being activated, a lot of price changes as well. Uh, so let's get started. So at the top of the table this week is your team with 81 points. Do you want to walk us through it?
Yeah, I think I had Haaland captain, which contributed to most of it. But overall, pretty solid week. Very high scoring week because of the captaincy on Haaland. Also, other high scoring players, even without owning Haaland, like Salah, Son, Palmer, they all came pretty good this week. For me, again, the defense has really come in clutch. Rhea, Poro, Trent, 6 points is still really good. It's kind of like an assist with a clean sheet for a midfielder. So I think it's undervalued. Reliable 6 points in defense with Rhea coming in at 10 has really shifted my game week in the positive direction. Gordon 10 points is pleasing as well because I went heavy on the Newcastle attack and been getting it's like 1 out of 4 now in 2 weeks. So just pretty relieved to get something out of all that investment there in attack.
Yeah, I mean, Isak got an assist last week as well, though. But yeah, really jealous of your Raya points, especially as a Henderson owner. It's a pretty significant difference in just the goalkeeper position. Uh, Going on to my team, this week was definitely much better than last week with 75 points. But Nkunku continues to be a problem. Was really disappointed to see him lose his spot. Uh, After Kwanzaa last week, it looks like I have fires to put out each week. Really happy about the Robinson transfer in though. He got an assist and some bonus points. And Joao Pedro also like making sure that me picking him wasn't penalized too much. So yeah, happy to see him play 94 minutes because he got the winner late into stoppage time. Hoping that continues at least till the international break.
And I think similar theme as last week, just got really unlucky here with Eze and Bruno. I think we'll touch upon kind of like those underperformers in this.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's the same with the machines team as well. Having Eze in there, once again, he had a lot of shots. He looked really good, and he even scored in midweek, which was quite sad to see because you want to see them score those points in the Premier League. But the AI team got 70 points. I think the biggest downside was not having Haaland, and but I think what this shows is that even if Haaland does really well and you don't even own him, you can still do well. Like if the AI team had captained Salah or Palmer, and it was a very marginal decision, I think it would have actually done better than us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think distributing the funds is not at all a bad thing this season. Like all the premiums are doing really well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any template this season. Like you can really just go any way and get points, which is amazing. Actually, it's really happy with the way that the first few weeks have shown that you can have different combinations and be very innovative this year.
And I think that's a good sign for someone like me who is already trailing in a lot of my mini leagues. So there will always be differentials to pick as long as there are no major injuries. So let's look at our mini league standings. So this is our last minute FPL mini league. You will see the league code on screen if you want to join it. But Rishabh Guy is right at the top with 165 points, and I'm bringing down the wooden spoon at the 7th spot with 129 points.
The AI team closely competing in second there.
Yeah, it's doing better than a lot of the humans here. But yeah, it's still early days. I think that you'll see a lot of fluctuations in the standings in the early weeks. Maybe after the second international break, we'll see it settle down.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at some of the important games that happened last week. I think I'll hand it over to you with Chelsea's excellent 6-2 win.
Oh yeah, that was a magnificent game. Like I think the game was really end to end. From the first minute to kind of like the last minute, it was attack on the Wolves side, attack on the Chelsea side. First half was chaotic, ended 2-2. But I think second half, it's probably because Wolves really did not pay attention to kind of like their left hand side defense. Madueke just had so much free space and was very clinical. So I think if you look at the XG data, it didn't show that Chelsea had like big chances or something like that. But just from the ITIS perspective, I think they just had a lot of space and really good quality chances with clinical finishing from Madueke. Palmer in the central position was excellent. I think he was just pulling the strings, and he's such a classic player. Like even the goal was really well taken, and I think overall it was a very sparkling performance from an attacking perspective. Defense is of course still a worry. Hopefully they'll get that right over the next few weeks and then maintain that attacking prowess.
Yeah,
but of course, like, one of the downsides is no Nkunku, and I think that's a bad decision to start with.
Yeah, I think Madueke did what we were hoping Nkunku would do. But yeah, the goals were really great, especially some of the finishes. They were almost identical, a couple of them. But chances on both ends, and a really exciting game from an FPL perspective, because Palmer looks like he's really established himself as a reliable premium pick.
Yeah, but I think with Chelsea and attack, it's really hard to choose anyone except for Palmer. There are too many people. Like there's Neto, Felix, and Kunku who came off the bench. It's highly likely that someone is gonna come in for and start at some point in time, and you wouldn't be surprised if someone is shifted out. Mudryk, Madueke, they get shifted out. It's not going to be a surprise, and they might go 3 in midfield, in which case it's even more competition up front. So I'm very hesitant to go anywhere near that attack, except for Palmer. But they're very punty players. I think that because they're so cheap, they could also strike really big.
Yeah, and speaking of cheap players, I watched the Brighton United extended highlights. I didn't get. Luckily, I didn't wake up to see the game, but really disappointing as a United fan and as a Bruno owner once again. Bruno, I don't think he was as exciting to watch as the first game, but he did have that one big assist chance, which Xerxes ended up being offside when Garnacho almost had an open goal. And United's defense again losing their concentration deep into stoppage time. Almost, I think 10 players were in the box, but somehow there were 3 Brighton players free at the far post. It's like a moment of panic that I think will take some time for us to actually trust the United defense. And this is why I was advising against Mazraoui last week as well. And even in attack, I think if you have Bruno already, you can hold on to him. But I wouldn't be looking at getting any United players, especially with the fixtures coming up. Is there any other game you want to talk about?
I think we do have to touch upon the Man City 4-1 game with the Haaland hat-trick. I do have some regret not going with the triple captaincy, especially if there's not going to be an opportunity to use it in the future on a double game week or something like that, depending on kind of how the fixtures play out. But from a predictability perspective, this was a highly predictable thrashing, which really happened. And well done to those who went with the triple captain.
Yeah, definitely kudos to whoever activated the chip. I think when he got a brace so early on, most of us were probably scared that he would get a 4 or 5 goal return. So from that perspective, 3 goals was actually mercy. But the other game that I watched was the Villa-Arsenal game. And I think that Arsenal's defense kept 2 clean sheets, but in both games, I felt like they should have really conceded. Watkins missed 2 really big chances. So they haven't looked as solid as they did last season, but they've come away with those 2 clean sheets. And in attack, they're clinical. This is a tricky game that was 0-0 at halftime, and they found a way to get those 2 goals that put the result beyond doubt. And they're definitely looking like more and more like an elite team with each passing week.
Yeah, for sure. One of the teams that I think we should also touch upon is Newcastle, Bournemouth, 1-1. I think a lot of us own Newcastle players. Even in the cup game today, they drew 1-1, I think, with Forest. They've not had the best of starts. I think it's a big question, do we hold on to their assets or look to move them on? What's going on there? I am a bit concerned. I own Gordon and Isaac pretty heavy into Newcastle, and it is concerning me.
Yeah, and before we go to the next topic, I do want to touch upon the Spurs Everton game. Like we expected, Everton weren't so great defensively, and Spurs really wreaked havoc. It's unfortunate that Solanke was injured. He would have probably got a return or two. But Son and Madison, and again Son, like not many people own him, but he's another option. Like he's matching Salah, he's matching Palmer, and Saka. So yeah, really exciting season with a lot of options.
Yeah, he's such an exciting player. I do feel unlucky missing out on Solanke. I had to move him out because of the injury, and I think this season especially, it hurts more. Like if you get a bit unlucky in certain cases because you really miss out on those accumulated transfers. Um, I think there is value in having a stronger bench because you get the option to save transfers and then make bigger changes later on by playing someone from the bench. And right now, I don't have anyone who's playable from the bench, and I think that's a very very strong initial learning that I have in terms of how the season is shaping up.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with early transfers is that there's also price changes. So it's tough to sit and swallow a 0.1 drop, especially when you know that the player is not really an asset anymore. I think that applies to, say, Kwanzaa or Solanke or even Nkunku. If you know that these players are not going to play the next week, maybe bite the bullet and go for it.
Especially at this point of the season, a 0.1 drop is essentially like a 0.5 miss because you cannot really make a direct swap or like a two-player swap at the same price point. So it's pretty painful. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and for all the patience that we ask people to show, I think I've made an early transfer this week as well. But
me too.
Yeah, we'll go into that when we talk about our teams. So yeah, let's take a look at the best attacks and worst attacks, just like last week. But we have twice the data now, so it's at least the data is twice as significant. But it's still early days and just 2 games have passed. But you see all the usual suspects rising at the top. Liverpool, Man City are at the top. Everton and Ipswich are right at the bottom. So it is taking shape. One thing to note though is that the red color teams here are teams that are overperforming their XG, and green highlighted teams are teams that are underperforming their XG. But it looks like most teams are at least above 1 XG per game, which tells you that clean sheets are not as likely as you would think. And one thing that I really stood out to me was Ipswich has an XG per 90 of just 0.3. I know they played Liverpool and City, but it's still something to note because it's so far an outlier and maybe a fixture to target for defenses.
Yeah, the other thing that's standing out here is Crystal Palace. Like you have them at the bottom of the worst attacks list, where the goals per 90 is 0.5, XG per 90 is 1.26. How should we interpret that? Say if we own like a Munoz or a Henderson.
This is more of the attacking data, right? So I think like it's more applicable to players like Eze or Mateta, because like what this tells me is they are creating the expected goals. They're just not converting it. And I think long term, it is better to generate XG as opposed to be overperforming your XG. So I think that Palace will come good, but it is unfortunate that in a couple of fixtures where they did well, they created chances, they couldn't finish. So when there are other players who have returned, it is points that you've lost and you'll probably not get them back. But what this tells me is you can hold on to them. I know they do have Chelsea away next, but as the fixtures...
It's getting unlucky essentially as a owner is what this data shows.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely... It's definitely an underperformance compared to what is expected, but it also means that they are likely to continue getting the chances, and hopefully there will be averaging out and they overperform sometime in the next couple of weeks. I think the other thing to note is Chelsea has gone from underperforming to overperforming directly because of that one fixture, but I wouldn't read too much into it. Like you said, there were a lot of chances. Like the game was very open. So even though In terms of XG, they created a lot lesser than they actually scored. I felt while watching the game that this is a team that's going to break open some of the lesser teams. So I wouldn't read, let's say, City overperforming or Chelsea overperforming or Arsenal overperforming as a negative thing. As long as they keep creating those chances, I think you will expect the better players to do well.
Yeah, but I think there will be a regression here because, although I mean this data clearly shows that Chelsea is overperforming in attack, but if you look at the goal score, it was like 3 carbon copy goals. I don't expect that other teams will allow that, so there probably will be a regression in terms of it's not going to be like 5 goals, 6 goals every game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And last thing I want to point out here is United are creating almost 2 xg per game, but they've only scored 1 goal per game. I'm hoping that that's something that reverts to the mean at some point, but I'm not really sure if that's going to happen because we don't really have experienced attackers or clinical attackers yet. Rashford has looked out of sorts for a couple of seasons now, and everyone else in attack apart from Bruno is very young and they haven't had so much experience. Hoping that Ahmad and Garnacho step up. Yeah. So now let's look at the defenses. Again, you'll see that Liverpool and City are the best defenses, and Ipswich is the worst defense. So both in attack and defense, it looks like Liverpool and City are the teams to target, and Ipswich are the teams. Ipswich is the team that you want to play against. And here, Chelsea, Wolves, Everton, and Palace are the teams that are underperforming. And Arsenal, Newcastle, West Ham, and Fulham are overperforming. So it's interesting to see that Arsenal is overperforming both in attack and defense. Defense, like we spoke about, there were a couple of really big chances that Watkins had that he missed. And on the other side, Palace are underperforming both in attack and defense. So you could call it unlucky, you could say that it'll revert to the mean, but in the past 2 game weeks at least, Arsenal owners have gotten, they're above the green, I would say.
One of the things this is pointing out is Everton look pretty bad. Like their XGC is what, like the third worst, and also goals conceded is 3.5, which is the worst in this list here. So they actually had one of the best defenses last year if you look at goals conceded, and they actually show up in our fixture list in terms of like one of the better defenses based on their stats from last year. I think it's safe to say we don't want to go near Everton defense at this point in time.
Yeah, and the way I would also look at this is like look at purely the XGC per 90 metric, and if that value is less than 1, then the team is a really good defense. So anything above 1 xg, especially anything above 1.5 xg, just don't go for the clean sheets. Maybe you're finding an enabler or something.
Closer to 2, it's essentially you're getting a -1. Like you're expecting like 1 point for that defender.
Yeah, and yeah, I think especially with Everton, like you said, you never know what to expect. Like same thing happened last year where the first 10 game weeks they couldn't keep a clean sheet, and then the Pickford went on a run of 6 or 7 clean sheets in 7 games. So I think it's very unpredictable with some of these teams, whereas with Liverpool, City, and Arsenal, you have that reliability factor when you spend that million or 1.5 million more.
Yeah, agree.
So let's take a look at some of the fixtures for next week. Which is the game that you're most excited about?
I really like the Chelsea Palace game. I also like the West Ham Man City game. I think these are the 2 games, of course, like it's probably because I do own assets from both these clubs in terms of attack, and I'm excited about the captaincy potential. But I think, especially looking at the Chelsea Palace fixture, given that Palace is going through a little bit of a defensive problem, like even though the data doesn't show that they're that bad, but they've lost Anderson. Right? He's moved away. They might lose Curry, don't know, depending on the transfer deadline. It does seem like it's a fixture where there is a lot of potential again for Chelsea to run dry. So I'm pretty excited about that one.
The one game which I'm not at all excited about is the United Liverpool game. Liverpool have looked amazing. I didn't expect them to get off to such a flying start, both in terms of stats, eye test. Almost every player is looking at their best. And I think we are due a spanking from Liverpool. Last year we got away with it. We beat them in the FA Cup as well. But every couple of years you see one of those 5-0, 6-0, or 7-0 where Salah runs riot. Hoping that that doesn't happen, both from an FPL perspective, because I don't have any Liverpool attackers, and from a United perspective as a fan, because I think going into the international break with 3 points and a bad loss to Liverpool can see people actually asking for Ten Hag's head. Uh, and yeah, I saw a stat this week that said that from 92 to 2022, United conceded just 2 stoppage time winners in the Premier League, and under Ten Hag they've conceded 6. So I don't know if it's a manager thing or a player mentality thing, but that's a pretty stark stat.
I think United will do better. Like I think it's probably going to be a close game. That's the feeling I have, especially because I mean United have bolstered their defense compared to some of the biases from last year where they had to play with such a depleted defense, and Liverpool, they have looked really good like under Slot, but they're not as gung-ho as like how they are under Klopp with the new system. So I think United might surprise a few people this weekend.
I really hope so. And I think the other game, the first game, will also be of interest. Arsenal Brighton, because Brighton have looked good in attack, and Arsenal so far have gotten away with it in defense. It'll be I'm sure Arsenal create chances and score goals, but it'll be interesting to see how they deal with Brighton's attack.
That would be a really exciting game, like some sort of a high-scoring game where both sides create a lot of chances, a lot of goals. I think that'll be a great game for the neutrals.
I think another game that could be along similar lines is the Newcastle Spurs game. I think whenever you play Spurs, they almost ensure that the game is going to be exciting under Ange. And I think it'll play into Newcastle's hands too. With they've got a great attack, a young attack, and I think we could see goals on both sides there. Cool. We'll look at the easiest fixtures for the next 5. You want to take it?
Yeah, so there is definitely a fixture turn here, and that's clearly shown here by Villa, who are not amongst the top few from last time. So Villa really have a really strong fixture run. They have Leicester away, Everton home, Wolves home, Ipswich away, and United home. Really great fixtures if you want to go for a Watkins, or even from owning a defensive asset perspective like Konsa. I think they're certainly a team that I'm looking to target. The other team that kind of like stands out here is, surprisingly to me, like when I was kind of creating this table, is Arsenal, because I was always kind of like staying away from Arsenal, thinking of the tougher fixtures. But if you look at the next 5, they have Brighton at home, Leicester at home, and Southampton at home. 3 are the next 5, which is really, really good fixtures for Havertz or a Saka. So I think even at this moment, getting an Arsenal player in attack sounds like a really good option. And out of the other 2 fixtures, of course, Man City away is tough, but one of the 2 fixtures I didn't mention is Tottenham away, and that could be a high-scoring game as well, like a North London derby. So I think Arsenal is also another fixture, another team that I really like in terms of players that you might want to get for attack if you don't own a Saka or Havertz already.
I think that's very interesting because, yeah, sometimes we look at the Man City away fixture and we get clouded, and especially because it's next to Spurs away. But when you look at, when you mention those 5 fixtures that are upcoming, it just flipped a switch in me to, it does feel like 4 out of those 5 should see a lot of goals. And the other thing that's interesting here is I see you've struck out Everton as a defensive asset, even though their fixtures are good, and I fully echo that sentiment.
Yeah. And the other team that we definitely have to start looking at is Chelsea. Strong attack, and again, like really good 5 fixtures coming up: Palace at home, Bournemouth away, West Ham away, Brighton at home, and Forest at home. And I think I think when we're talking about Chelsea attack, it's mostly Palmer, maybe Madueke if he holds on to his place. I think one of the assets that could emerge from Chelsea, but it's a wait and watch for now, is Neto. Because Mudryk has not looked good. So if Neto can hold on to the left wing spot, I think that he's a potential option as well at 6.5. But at the moment, I think it's, if you can get Palmer, really enticing option to own for the next five.
Yeah, I really like Neto. I always felt, even when he was at Wolves, that he's someone who has potential to be one of the best players in the league. But yeah, I think that fixture run sounds extremely juicy, and whoever plays will get a lot of returns. And like you said, the question is who will play.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the most difficult fixtures.
Yeah, Spurs are right on top there. They have a tough fixture run coming in. They have, if you look at Spurs, they have Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, Man United away in the next five, along with Brighton away. Not an easy fixture. And the only fixture you might think is kind of like a reasonable one is Brentford at home. So Spurs is a team that you might. I mean, I'm looking at kind of moving on some of the assets that I own. I already moved away from Solanke. Porro is someone under consideration. I still like Porro because he might get that attacking return, like here and then. And I'm waiting to see how Spurs' defense shapes up. Like they might have tough fixtures, but as a backline, they're pretty strong. Like they have a good goalkeeper, Vicario, two strong defenders, Romero, Van de Ven, and Porro and Udogi. So they have a very good defensive lineup. So I think Porro I'm going to hold, but he's certainly on my exit list. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Porro is almost like job done, right? He's got a goal in his first game and a clean sheet in his second game. And what do you think about players like Madison? We have a lot of mid-price options, but he seems to be doing well. I know Son is expensive. We have a lot of alternatives. But like under an Ange team, do you think that they can still create enough chances?
I think so, but I feel like there might be better options with better fixtures. Like, for example, if you can move to a Mboemo, who has Southampton at home, similar price this week. And they're pretty good fixtures coming up as well, moving forward, where they have West Ham at home and Wolves at home as well in the next five. So, and he's on penalties. So I think if you just purely want to play the fixtures, there are other ways to move Madison to, like even Eze, for example. Eze also has pretty decent fixtures, not the best, but decent fixtures, and it's been doing well as well. So I think I would move Madison on to like an Eze or Mboemo because also they're on penalties. But I think from an attacking perspective, it's highly possible that he gets some returns as well.
And the other big question I have when I see this is that Man City has some difficult fixtures. Would you be tempted to spread the Haaland money around with so many premium midfielders doing well?
Yeah, I think the two main fixtures which really skews this is Arsenal home and Newcastle away. I think it's interesting, like if because the main issue with Haaland is around those fixtures he's certainly captainable, but teams with Haaland are banking on Haaland a lot for captaincy, with Isaac as a backup option ish, at least for my team. With Newcastle not doing so well, I think the fixture where Haaland plays Arsenal at home, you really need an alternative. Whether that alternative can be with Haaland, then that's not a bad option. But if you do not have a strong alternative, then I think it's worth moving him on, especially if you have some sort of a plan like a wild card soon after, like 2-3 weeks later when City's fixtures pick up again.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I wouldn't, take a hit and I'm not in a hurry to sell Haaland. But with how Salah is playing and the emergence of Palmer and Saka and maybe Foden will come into the mix. De Bruyne is doing well. So there are ways to get into that City attack if one of them nails down a spot. But like I said, even though Haaland got a hat trick, there were so many other players in midfield doing well. So I am tempted to spread the funds around, but it's not something that I'll be like losing sleep over. Having Haaland against West Ham away is not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, you could easily see that he gets another goal, maybe even 2 goals. Like so, I think he's still my captain option at the moment. The fixture that I'm worried about is Arsenal at home and probably Newcastle away, and I need to think out of some plan to from a captaincy perspective, which might actually involve moving Haaland on.
That makes sense. So we'll go into a position-wise discussion. We'll start with the forwards, and just like we spoke about Haaland, like he's averaging more than 1 xGI per game, and that's like extremely elite. That's like normally if you have anything above 0.6, you would consider that the forward is going to do well. They'll score in maybe 2 goals in every 3 games, but he's like a freak of nature, and you'll typically see him even outperform his xGI at times. So that's a great option. The other player who's high on this list is Evan Nilsson at 0.8 xg per game. He's played just 1 game, but I think that he's someone at 6 million, who could enable other things in your team, maybe on the wild card, someone to move, say, a Joao Pedro on to. Is there something that stands out to you in terms of forwards?
I'm really intensely looking at Watkins' data because he's one of the players that I think we both have on our buy list, especially with the fixture turn and his pedigree of what he's capable of, and Villa's a good team as well. So far, he started a bit slow, but I'm really hoping that maybe like within a week or so, he really shows himself up as an option in terms of this season's data and form as well, which would make moving Haaland on much easier.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too. I've listed him as a buy. If your team has that free transfer available, I think that the way I'm looking at it is move Haaland to Watkins whenever possible, and that will leave so much money to upgrade in midfield. You can literally go from bench fodder option to someone like a Palmer, and just the sound of it seems like it's got to give you more points because of the fixture run that Watkins has. In my keep section, I've kept Isak. He hasn't delivered like we expected him to, both from a Newcastle attack perspective and individually. But I mean, we got him in for a reason. I would be tempted to give him some more time, unless you have a luxury transfer available and you want to move him on to a Watkins. I don't think I'd move him on.
Yeah, I was actually considering moving Isak on and get to the teams, but I agree. Like, it's just I think for a team like mine, like where I own Gordon and Isak, I want to diversify away from Newcastle a bit. So he's a source of funds. So like if you can move him on to Watkins, I think, and you have a free transfer with no other fires. I think he's a player that. If I had that luxury, I would move on to Watkins, but certainly not a player that, if I have other issues in my team, I'd look to move on, because he could easily get goals against Spurs and really kick on from game week 3 onwards. I don't think there's enough data to say that Isak's not a good option anymore.
Yeah, that's basically why I've kept him in keep. I looked at some of the players that were being brought in a lot, and I've listed them in avoid. Welbeck and Joao Pedro mainly because you don't know who Brighton's going to play in the long run. Rutter is coming in, and after the international break, it'll be interesting to see who plays how many minutes. I think the time has probably passed on Pedro. I'm sure he'll start game week 3, but I wouldn't be in a rush to bring him in. And I've also included Jackson in here as well. A lot of managers bringing him in. But I think based on what you said about Chelsea, you don't know what that those lineups are going to be like. You don't know when they'll be substituted, and I wouldn't be in a rush to make any forward transfers right now. Like I think most of the forwards that people own are good players who should be getting minutes. So just give them some more time and see how they do.
Agree. I have Muniz. He didn't score this week in my keep, but it could easily be Muniz scoring next week and Smith Rowe not on the score sheet. So I think it's just hold. You're playing the fixtures with Fulham. The idea is, over the next 4, maybe 2 returns or something, and I'd take that.
And I see you mentioned Xerxes in avoid.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I don't know if Bruno is gonna play false 9, continue playing false 9, or Xerxes is gonna nail a spot. I would definitely like to own kind of like a nailed on Man United number 9, but at the moment, I think I'm just like staying away until there's some clarity there.
Yeah, I was expecting to see him start the second game. A bit surprised. Maybe he's not ready yet. But yeah, I think there's a lot of problems in at United still, and it's a little unclear on who in attack will nail down those spots. So I agree with the avoid. And from the AI projections, the Havertz Lovin continues, even though Haaland got a hat trick. Although I don't think this week it'll be captaining Havertz. Looks like it learned its lesson. But yeah, I think Havertz, Haaland, Isak, Mateta, Watkins, pretty much the similar five that we've been seeing in the past couple of weeks too. There's actually not too many forward options if you think about it compared
True.
to midfield. So yeah, I think it makes sense to go with like some of the established players, like one or two, and then one cheap enabler to help you have the best midfield that you can.
Yeah, I'm actually like you have Pedro on your avoid list, but with that eight attacker type of thing that I was talking about, where you want to bench fodder. I think Pedro is because there is such a dearth of attackers, bolstering up that midfield and having Pedro as like a rotation option. I think that's something I'm considering in in the future.
Yeah, and speaking of midfield, we'll go into midfield now. There are a lot of enablers in midfield as well, like Morgan Rogers. You have Smith Rowe, you have Gibbs White, a lot of Bailey. There's a lot of medium options. But what's interesting to me when I looked at the midfield data is there are a lot of midfielders nearly touching that 1x GI per appearance mark. It's still early days, of course, but you see all three Liverpool attackers here. You see De Bruyne here. I think he's going under the radar a bit. We all know how he almost always outperforms his XG, especially when he's shooting. So yeah, you see Diaz, De Bruyne, Madison, Jota, all these players look like really good options because you'd expect them to start when they're fit.
Yeah, the midfielder category is definitely the most exciting, and also the area with the most ceiling because they get that additional point. Um, I'm very intrigued by Diaz. If he can kind of nail down a spot to cover the two Liverpool fixtures when they're playing Forest at home, Bournemouth at home, and probably even Wolves away, then he's someone, if I can't get in Salah, then I can get in a Diaz and like get a Saka also. So he's someone I'm keeping an eye out on. Mitoma as well because Brighton do have some good fixtures coming up. They have Ipswich at home and Forest at home coming up, so it's really nice to see like Mitoma kind of continuing the form that he showed probably like 2 years back.
Yeah, and from an AI projections standpoint, I think that the midfield position is the one that I've historically found to be most similar to human picks. Like you'll see Salah, Palmer, Saka, Diaz, Foden, De Bruyne, Eze, Son. Like it's almost the usual suspects and almost in the same order that like you'd see established FPL managers picking them. So I feel a little more comfortable relying on these projections when it comes to midfield. The one thing though that's different this year is because of the change in bonus points. Every forward that's scoring is almost getting on average 2 bonus for a goal that they score. So that's something to keep in mind. Like Pedro, for example, got a late goal, went up to 8 points. That's the one place where forwards are doing better than midfielders, but there's a huge dearth of options in attack compared to midfield.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about kind of like the bonus point implication, but it's good to know that the players with three forwards have something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think in game week, I don't know about the numbers in game week 2, but in game week 1, every goal that a forward scored got them on average 2.5 bonus, which is very huge. It makes up for the extra point that midfielders get for a goal. Looking at our recommendations, the players that I've listed as buy are Salah, ESR, and Rogers. Salah for the premium bracket and Smith Rowe and Morgan Rogers for the budget area. I think Salah is like he's such an established player when he's nailed on, and the reason I've kept him in buy this week is because he's about to play United, and like I said, it feels like Liverpool are due against United. Maybe that's my anti-bias as a United fan, but it feels like if you can go there, just go for it and captain him. That's the reason I put him in buy. So I see you've put Palmer.
Yeah, I have Palmer mainly because I think he can over the next five he can match anyone in the game. I think he and Saka. I think if you don't have Saka, also he's a great option to buy. He's very explosive. Like I think Palmer is very exciting because when you think of captaincy, you want these players who can get 10 plus, 12 plus, 14 plus, and I think he fits that category. So that's why I have him as a buy. Bruno, we have the same players to keep. I think it's partially we own them, want to keep them, but also they are playing well. They're just somehow dodging the points.
Yeah, I think the difference between someone like Bruno and Eze compared to Nkunku is you know that these players will play, you know they're the talismans of their teams. There's a reason we put them in our game week 1 teams. Nkunku, we thought he'd play and he's not. So I see we both put him in sell because now I feel he's a dead asset at least when you don't know whether he's going to start or not. I've also put Jota in avoid. The only reason for that is let's see how I feel like I've missed the ship has sailed. I've missed the boat, and I would like now that I've anyway waited till game week 3. I just want to see how the lineups in Europe will be. Darwin got some minutes, and Jota had an early sub, so I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe the odd game Darwin starts. So I just want to give it a couple more weeks to see how the minutes are managed.
Yeah, I have Son, not because he's a bad player or like he's not going to get points, but at his price point, he's competing against Palmer, Saka, Salah, and I think out of those four options with the fixtures coming up, he's the last one I would go for. So I just, even though he scored big this week, I think he's a player I would think twice before bringing him.
Yeah, and I think interesting point you mentioned about players who can get double-digit hauls. I think the advantage that someone like Palmer has is that Chelsea could easily turn into a free scoring team. So you would want the players who can get the high ceiling points and the teams that can rack up the goals. And so far, Chelsea has shown good signs on both those fronts.
Yeah, completely agree. I think also that he's kind of the central point of the attack for the team. He's really talismanic. So hopefully he kind of takes most of the points centered around him, and those types of assets are always great to own.
Let's move on to the defense. So above Trent this week, we have Milenkovic at a 0.99 XGI. But I think he's also played just one game, so I wouldn't read too much into it. But I think this table is taking more shape. I like the look of it because once you have a lot of games played, good defenders typically have around 0.2 or 0.3 XGI per game, not more than that. So I think because those numbers are similar to that, you are, I think, seeing something that kind of looks like what it would later in the season too. And you see some of the usual suspects. You see Trent, you see Robertson, you see Porro. Romero gets a lot of headers. So I think that it is taking shape, and we also know that the bigger teams are doing well in defense. So I think it's still worth that extra money to get at least two premium defenders, I would say. And I think the data is backing that up.
Yeah, the one defender I'm really, really excited about here is Rico Lewis. Because every time I watch him play, he plays so far. He plays really well. Like, firstly, for someone who's like 19, 20, he plays really, really well. Very good in kind of like the defensive part of the game, but also very technically good, like how Pep likes most of his players to be like very fluid in terms of where he moves around the pitch, and he moves pretty high. Like he goes and joins in the attack. It's kind of what I expected of Guardiola. Guardiola kind of just stays back, at least from what I've seen this season. Rico Lewis, I think he's going to maintain his place. He's playing really, really well. Pep has been effusive in praise in his post-match press conferences. So risk of Walker, but I think he'll maintain his place, and if he does maintain his place, I'll just switch Guardiola out for Lewis or get him on top.
Yeah, I think especially if you have a deep bench, having Rico Lewis makes sense. I didn't go for him last week when I had the chance because I felt like once bitten, twice shy with Kwanzaa. So I thought, let me just go for someone who I know will play. But as long as Walker doesn't play, Guardiola will sit back. Lewis will be the player who's going up. And I think he should have got an attacking return versus Ipswich too. He was pretty unlucky not to. He was getting into really good positions. But the players I've listed as buy, apart from Trent, because I think Trent again, Liverpool are controlling the game. They should keep more clean sheets. But the other player is Konza. We already spoke about Villa's fixtures. So if you want like a cheap defender who you can just keep in the team for the next 4 or 5 game weeks, he's a good option.
Yeah, I have Trent in both buy and keep because he's just been so spectacular. Like in terms of the way he started the season, I think he's top for XA or XA per 90. Like he has definitely been underperforming his attacking returns from what he should be getting in terms of FPL points. But such a quality player, good fixtures coming up. I think he's a player that you probably should own.
Yeah, and the player I've kept in keep is Guardiola. I see that he's getting mass sold. I mean, he's kept a clean sheet, and the second game was a blank. But I think there is something about a nailed-on City defender. They concede very little XG. They keep a lot of the ball. So unless you really are desperate for funds, I wouldn't move him on. And it's a reliable option to rack up those clean sheet points. And if Walker gets into the team, who knows? He can again become the attacking option that he was last year.
Yeah, I agree. I own Guardiola. I think I'm just keeping him for the time being. It's only when I probably play the wildcard I'll think twice on in terms of whether I can get some more funds by moving him on to someone cheaper.
Yeah, and in avoid, I saw that a lot like Wout Fass. He got a price rise, and then he was linked to a move away immediately. So I'm not sure he's a good option. Same thing with Romero. He basically got an attacking return and people are bringing him in. But I think there are better Spurs defenders. If you can go for Van der Ven, who's cheaper, or Porro for a better attacking option. Like I think spending 5 million is for a Spurs defender is not worth it.
Agree. I have Chelsea again, like the same as last week in avoid. Though they have good fixtures, I really want to move them to buy. But at the moment, I think it's still there's still no shape in the defense in terms of like some defensive solidity, because even Enzo Caicedo, they're not very good from a defensive perspective. So even in the middle of the park, very very shaky. So they're players that I want to get, but I'm still holding on for maybe like another week before I suggest, like, for example, a Reece James, who's so exciting to own at like 5 million, and he's going to be back game week 4.
And yeah, I think with Chelsea, like if I look at the AI projections, for example, it's all the usual suspects with Liverpool defenders, Arsenal defenders, City defenders, Porro and Robinson. But I also see Gusto there. What do you think about him? Is he someone who can keep a spot?
No, I think because he's competing with Reece James, who's the captain of the club and he's probably the best player in the club. But at the same time, Gusto's been playing really well. He is there on merit, like in the first team. He's really solid, really good defender, pretty good attacking. But when you have Reece James as your competition, he's not a player that you can go near. I would say Colwill, Cucurella, they're the two players that I would get at the moment from Chelsea. Maresca said Colwill in his press conference, he sees Colwill as one of the like vice captains of the group. So he definitely sees like leadership and he wants to build around Colwill. And if you watch the games, he's really good at building on from the back. He really sprays the passes, he fizzes them into the forward areas. So I think he's going to be an integral part of Maresca's team. And Cucurella, he's the first choice left back. There's no Chilwell anymore. I think Vega is going to be second choice. So Cucurella and Colwill seem like pretty safe options.
Yeah, I think that's promising signs for some of the young Chelsea defenders. In terms of sell, we spoke about Walker, so I won't spend more time talking about it. And yeah, do you want to mention Hall and Livramento? Because you don't know who's going to play.
I think I had them in my initial first videos, players like differential type of players who could become exciting in the future. It seems like they're players to avoid at this point in time now, because Hall has not looked very good. Like he is pretty weak defensively. He played for like 20 minutes last game, so his minutes are under question. Trippier came on for Livramento. last game, so Trippier is also making his way back. I'm not sure if Trippier is going to get his move. So Livramento also is a question mark. So I think these are two players, although exciting at 4.5, they're now firmly in the sell category.
Makes sense. We'll be quick with the keepers because I don't think we want to waste our transfers on keepers right now unless you're doing a wild card. I see you've put Sanchez in buy this time.
Yeah, he's moved up because I think the main thing is we're waiting for understanding who's going to be number one. Maresca confirmed Sanchez is going to be the number one keeper very explicitly, as he's been in all his press conferences, and Jorgensen's going to be the cup keeper. So, if you're holding on to Henderson and you have only 4.5, Sanchez seems like a better option. Like Chelsea have good fixtures, it's quite possible that the defense improves, especially with ball possession, if they maintain a lot of it. So that's why I kind of put him in the buy if you want to move on Henderson, for example.
I think he's the standout wildcard keeper option then at 4.5. Yeah. Cool. Let's move on from the keepers. So since a lot of you are activating your wildcards this week, we thought we'd look at some potential wildcard teams. So the team on the left is what the AI has put together. I think it's a very well balanced team. So it's a no Haaland draft with Havertz and Isak up front. I think Watkins was almost there in the team, but at 9 million, it couldn't afford him. I think midfield is exciting with Salah, Eze, Palmer, Gordon, and Diaz. Interestingly, no Saka because it's decided to spend some money in defense with both Robertson and White in the team. And Anthony Robinson as the third defender. Probably Sanchez will come into the team as keeper. I wasn't sure about his X-Men's, but once I update that, I'm sure he'll make it to the team. Do you want to walk through the team that we put together?
Yeah, I mean, this is the more human team because we have players like Saka, Palmer, Havertz, Isaac, João Pedro. These are players that, they're all SA and wings. So they're all players that have done pretty well to start the season with. I really like the wildcard team compared to the AI team, mostly because, I'm not quite sure about Gordon, Jefferson, and Luis Diaz. But who am I to argue with the team that's second in the league?
Yeah, and I think the only thing that I might look at for the human wildcard team is somehow getting Watkins in there, maybe instead of Havertz, like finding some money maybe from Trent to move him down to someone, or like downgrading one of the premium midfielders. I think apart from that, it looks really good. Okay, let's look at our teams for this week. We'll start with the AI team. Once again, it's going for an Arsenal player as captain, this time Saka. But what's interesting is Saka, Palmer, Salah are all so close to each other in terms of projected points. I'm just jealous that it has all three of them. Like basically, instead of Palmer and Salah, I have just Haaland in my team. I think apart from that, it's the same team. It's saving a transfer this week. So it'll have more to play with in the next week.
This team looks incredibly strong. I mean, this is what like a no Haaland draft really enables. Like 3 premiums with like Havertz instead of a Haaland. I'm worried.
Yeah, I'm worried about your team. I see you've made a couple of early transfers.
I took a hit, so I moved on. Essentially, like my idea was. I didn't want to double Newcastle attack. So it was either, I know Gordon scored, but it was either moving on Gordon or Isaac. I feel like Isaac has more potential to points, even though Gordon scored this week because of penalties and he's just like the number 9 for Newcastle. So I moved Gordon on to just release some funds so that I can get Palmer because he's 7.5. It's easier to get Palmer from Gordon. And Nkunku had to leave the team because I don't have a bench. I think that's one of the things that I'm struggling a little bit is I don't have a playable bench. So if I have a fire to put out, I'm consuming transfers week after week. So I went with Rodgers. I don't know if I'm very excited about the pick. Villa have good fixtures. He looked good, but I don't know, how impactful he's going to be from an FPL perspective. But he's 5 million. He enables Palmer, and it lets me survive for another week.
Yeah, I think exciting transfer for sure, and I'm sure as a Chelsea fan you'll enjoy watching Palmer play.
Yeah, that's another small bias in terms of getting him.
So I've also made an early transfer. I couldn't bear to watch Nkunku go down in price. I think may have made a bit of a hasty one. I went with Smithrow to save that money, that 1 million. I hope he plays longer minutes. He got subbed slightly early both weeks so far. I'm still deciding who to start between Robinson, Konza, and Joao Pedro. I think that's a decision that will go down to the wire. And also a little worried about the fixtures that Bruno and Eze have. They've underperformed and now they have tricky fixtures too. Really hoping that they come good because Bruno's already dropped in price as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good pick because Smithrow, he has pedigree, right? He's like one of the players who can get FPL points. Like Rodgers, I have no idea. I think it's Smithrow because I already have Muniz. Again, I don't want to fall into the same trap of doubling up on a single team in attack. But I think solid pick.
Yeah. And yeah, I think before we finish, I just wanted to talk about the decision to wildcard. So I was thinking that for most of us, it doesn't make sense to wildcard, especially if you have a bunch of good players already in your team. But let's say you have an Nkunku, Kwanzaa, a Barco, some of these players who've lost their places and you want to take advantage of the price changes. I think it's okay to activate it. But all these attackers aren't suddenly going to be bad options. You could literally see a week where all the players who've blanked so far do well and the players who've done well blank. It wouldn't be a surprise at all. So yeah, I would say be patient, but definitely it's a time to be aggressive if you want to capitalize on the price changes.
Yeah, I think the main thing is like have a plan around some of the, like for example, probably if you're wildcarding now, you may not have Haaland, but in 3 weeks time, you might want him back because City's fixture will get really juicy, like from game week 6 or 7. So I think wildcard is fine, but I think just having a plan in terms of what you want to do a little bit further down the line is going to be handy while building that team.
I think that makes sense, yes. Cool. I think that brings us to the end of this week's podcast. We'll see you all next week. Do like, share, and subscribe to our video. I think that would really help us. Any parting thoughts, Vikas?
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see anything else in terms of the analysis or any changes that you'd like, just do let us know in the comments.
Thank you, and hope you have some nice green arrows. Bye.